I still remember the weight of my son that day. It was the first time I held him close. I thought that moment would connect them both, that it would soften the space between them then, between the two women I loved the most. But love does not work the way we think. There was a shift, small at first, hidden from view. A look that stayed a bit too long, a silence that felt heavy, heavier than words could be, a door that closed softer than it did before. I did not see it clearly back then. I told myself it was nothing at all, just being tired, adapting to the new life ahead. But something had changed deep inside of me, and I felt it in places I could not name. In the way my chest got tight in that room, in the way I picked my words with more care, in the way I learned to hold my breath there, until something happened I could not look away from. A moment so small it almost passed me by, but it was enough to crack things in half, and I stood right in the middle of it, trying to hold both sides with my two hands, not knowing the more I held, the more I broke. Some wounds do not bleed where you can see, but they hurt deep where nobody looks. If this story touches you, join the channel now. Here, nobody needs to act like things are fine.
There was a time when things felt simple between them. My mother would come over on Sunday mornings without calling first. She brought fresh bread from the bakery she loved downtown. My wife made coffee the way my mother liked it, strong. They sat at the kitchen table together back then. I remember hearing their voices blend into soft laughter from outside. It was not loud or forced at all those days. It was just easy, natural, the way it should be. My mother asked about the baby room we were preparing upstairs. My wife showed her the paint colors we had chosen together. They talked about names, about tiny clothes, about hope filling our home. I stood by the doorway watching them in complete silence. I felt something warm settle deep inside my chest that morning. This is what family is supposed to feel like always. Two people I loved building something together with me between them. My mother touched my wife's hand across the table gently that day. My wife smiled back, and my mother smiled right back at her. There was no tension hanging heavy in the air around us, no careful words, no looks that lasted too long or hurt. Just two women waiting for the same small life to arrive. I thought this was how it would always be, forever. That the baby would make everything even stronger than before now, that love would multiply, not divide us into separate sides later. My mother stayed for lunch that day, like she always did. My wife cooked her favorite meal without being asked to do it. They spoke about the future like it belonged to both equally. I watched them from across the room, feeling grateful inside my heart. My mother talked about her own pregnancy with me years ago. My wife listened, asking questions, leaning forward with real interest showing. They laughed about cravings, about fears, about the unknown ahead. I saw my mother place her hand on my wife's belly. My wife did not pull away or tense up at all. She just smiled and said she hoped for his grandmother's eyes. My mother's face softened in a way I had not seen before. For a moment, I thought they had become more than family. I thought they had become friends who chose each other freely. I did not know I was watching the last good day, the last time everything felt whole and unbroken between us all. I did not know that soon I would stand between them, not as a son, not as a husband either anymore, but as someone trying to hold two worlds together with bare hands, two worlds that were slowly starting to drift apart without warning. I wish I had known what was coming next for us. I wish I had held on tighter to that moment back then. But we never know when the before is ending for good. We only see it clearly when the after has already begun. Only nothing stays the same forever in this life.
The baby came on a Tuesday morning in early spring. My mother arrived at the hospital within the first hour. My wife was still in recovery, tired but glowing with life. I held my son in my arms near the window. My mother stood beside me, looking down at his tiny face. She touched his hand, and he gripped her finger tight. I saw tears fill her eyes as she whispered his name. This is her first grandchild, I thought to myself then. This moment belongs to her as much to us. When my wife woke up, I brought the baby to her. My mother followed close behind me into the recovery room. My wife reached for our son with both arms open wide. I placed him gently on her chest where he belonged. My mother stood at the foot of the bed, watching quietly. She did not move closer or ask to hold him again. I thought she was just giving my wife space to bond. But then I noticed something small shift in the room. My wife looked up at my mother for just a second. My mother looked back but did not smile this time. It was not anger, not coldness, nothing I could name clearly. Just a pause that felt slightly longer than it should. My wife looked down at the baby again without speaking. My mother took a step back toward the door behind her. I felt something tighten in my chest, but ignored it fast. We brought the baby home 3 days later that same week. My mother came over the next morning to help us settle. She walked into the house carrying bags of food and supplies. My wife was sitting on the couch, holding the baby close. My mother set the bags down and asked if she could hold him. My wife hesitated for just a moment before saying yes quietly. It was less than a second, barely noticeable to anyone else. But I saw it, and I know my mother saw it too. My wife handed the baby over with careful, slow hands. My mother took him and sat down in the chair across the room. Not beside my wife on the couch where there was space. Across the room, like there was distance now between them both. I stood between them, feeling something strange pull at me inside. My wife watched my mother hold our son without saying a word. My mother rocked him gently but did not look up at her. The silence was not peaceful like it used to be before. It was thick, heavy, like something unspoken lived there now. I told myself I was imagining things that were not real, that they were both just tired from the birth and stress, that everything would go back to normal after some rest came. But later that night, when my mother left to go home, my wife did not walk her to the door like she always did. She stayed on the couch, holding the baby, staring at nothing ahead. I asked her if everything was okay between them both. She said yes, but her voice sounded flat and far away. I did not push. I let it go. I wanted to believe her. But something had shifted, something I could not see or touch. A crack so thin it was almost invisible to my eyes. But it was there, growing quietly beneath the surface of everything. I felt it deep inside, but I did not understand it yet.
The weeks after we brought the baby home felt strange. Not bad, not good, just heavy in a way I could not explain. My mother came over every other day to help us out. She brought food, she held the baby, she asked how we were. But something was different in the way she moved around our home. She did not sit on the couch with my wife anymore. She stayed in the kitchen or in the baby room upstairs. She talked to me more than she talked to her. And when she did talk to my wife, her voice sounded careful, like she was walking on glass that could break at any moment. My wife did not say much about it back then. She thanked my mother for the food she brought each time. She let her hold the baby when she asked to do so. But she did not ask my mother to stay longer than needed. She did not offer coffee like she used to do before. She did not walk her to the door when she left our house. I started to feel something pull inside my chest each visit, like I was being stretched in 2 directions at the same time. When my mother was there, I stayed close to her side. I wanted her to feel welcome in our home, like always. But when she left, my wife would go quiet for hours. She would hold the baby and stare out the window without speaking. I asked her once if something was wrong between them both. She said no, but her eyes told a different story. To me. I asked my mother the same thing on the phone one night. She said everything was fine, but her voice sounded tired and distant. I wanted to believe them both. I wanted it to be true, but I could feel the distance growing wider every single day. I was caught in the middle without knowing how I got there. I started to choose my words more when they were together. I watched what I said to my mother in front of her. I watched what I said to my wife when my mother called me. I did not want to hurt either of them with the wrong words. But the truth is, I was already hurting myself by doing that. One night, my wife asked me why my mother came so often. Her voice was calm, but I felt something sharp beneath the question. I told her my mother just wanted to help with the baby. My wife nodded and said nothing else after that moment. But I saw the way her jaw tightened when I said it. I saw the way she turned away from me in bed that night. I could not sleep. I just lay there staring at the ceiling. I thought about my mother at home alone without us near her. I thought about my wife beside me feeling something I could not reach. I thought about my son sleeping in the other room peacefully. And I realized I was trying to hold 3 lives together now, but my hands were not big enough to carry them all at once. Something was slipping through my fingers no matter what I did. I could feel it falling, breaking, cracking apart piece by piece, and I did not know how to stop it from happening. I wanted to keep it all whole like it was before, but something had already broken deep inside of us.
There were things we carry inside that never get said, words that sit heavy on our chest but never leave our mouth. I started to feel that weight grow heavier every single day. My wife stopped asking when my mother would visit us next. She just waited for me to tell her when she was coming. And when I did, she would nod without looking at my face. She never said no. She never said it was too much. She just went quiet in a way that felt louder than screaming. I could see it in the way she held the baby tighter, like she was protecting him from something I could not see clearly. My mother started calling me instead of just showing up anymore. She asked if it was okay to come over first each time. She never used to ask. She just came like family does. But now she waited for me to say yes before she drove over. And when she did come, she stayed for shorter visits than before. She held the baby, she smiled, she talked to me about small things. But her eyes looked sad in a way I had never seen, like she was losing something she could not get back again. I wanted to ask her what was wrong deep inside her heart. I wanted to ask my wife what was hurting her so much. But I was afraid of what they would say if I asked. I was afraid they would make me choose between them both. So I said nothing. I just carried the weight of their silence. I carried it when my mother left and my wife exhaled with relief. I carried it when my wife went to bed and I called my mother. I carried it when I held my son and wondered what he would remember. Would he grow up feeling this distance between the women he loved? Would he learn to carry silence the same way I was doing now? One afternoon, my mother came over while my wife was resting upstairs. She sat at the kitchen table holding the baby in her arms. I made her tea and sat down across from her in silence. She looked at me with tired eyes that seemed older than before. She did not say anything, but I could feel her question hanging there. Am I still welcome here, or am I just in the way now? I wanted to tell her she would always be welcome in our home, but the words felt stuck somewhere deep inside my throat that day, because I was not sure if it was true anymore at all. I was not sure if my wife wanted her there every other day. I was not sure if I was making things worse by letting her come. My mother kissed the baby on his head and handed him to me. She stood up and said she should go home now before traffic started. But it was only 3 in the afternoon. There was no traffic yet. She just wanted to leave before my wife came downstairs again. I walked her to the door without saying much at all that day. She hugged me tight, tighter than she usually did back then, and when she pulled away, I saw tears in her eyes for a moment. She did not cry, she just blinked them away and smiled at me. She told me to call her if I needed anything at all. Then she left, and I stood at the door watching her drive away. I felt something break inside me that I could not name or fix. I went back inside and sat on the couch holding my son close. My wife came down the stairs a few minutes after that moment. She asked if my mother had left already without looking at me. I said yes, and she nodded like she expected it to happen. We did not talk about it, we just let the silence fill the room. And that silence became the third person living in our house now. It sat between us at dinner, it lay between us at night. It followed us into every room we entered together each day. And then came the moment I will never forget. It happened on a Sunday morning 3 months after the birth. My mother came over like she always did on those weekend days. She brought fresh fruit and asked if she could take the baby outside. The weather was warm, the sun was bright, it seemed like a good day. My wife was in the kitchen making lunch for all of us then.
I was in the living room folding clothes from the dryer that morning. My mother took the baby to the backyard to sit in the shade. I could see them through the window from where I was standing. She was talking to him, smiling, holding him close to her chest gently. He was looking up at her face with his big eyes open wide. I felt something warm spread through me watching them together like that. This is what I wanted, I thought to myself right then. My mother being part of his life, being close to him always. But then I heard my wife stop moving in the kitchen behind me. I turned around and saw her standing at the window too. She was watching them in the backyard without saying a single word. Her face was calm, but her hands were gripping the counter tight. I walked over to her and asked if she was okay that moment. She did not answer me. She just kept staring out the window there. Then she said something that made my chest feel heavy and cold. She said she felt like a guest in her own son's life now. Her voice was quiet, but every word cut through me like glass breaking. I did not know what to say. I just stood there frozen next to her. She turned away from the window and went back to making lunch alone. I looked outside again and saw my mother still holding our son close. She had no idea what my wife had just said in the kitchen. She had no idea that something had just shifted inside my wife's heart. I felt torn in a way I had never felt before that day. I wanted my mother to be close to my son like she was, but I also wanted my wife to feel like his mother first always. And I realized in that moment that I could not give them both what they needed. One of them would always feel like they were losing something here. I went outside and told my mother lunch was almost ready for us. She stood up and handed the baby back to me with a smile. We walked inside together and I gave him to my wife right away. My wife took him without looking at my mother standing there beside me. My mother noticed. I could see it in the way her smile faded fast. She sat down at the table and did not say much during lunch. My wife did not say much either. She just focused on the baby. I tried to fill the silence with small talk that felt empty and forced. But nothing I said could cover the tension sitting between them both. After lunch, my mother said she should go home early that day. She did not give a reason. She just said she was tired from the week. My wife did not ask her to stay longer like she used to do before. She just said okay and went upstairs with the baby in her arms. I walked my mother to the door feeling something break inside me. She hugged me and told me to take care of myself and them. But the way she said it felt like a goodbye to something more. Like she knew things would never be the same after this day ended. I watched her drive away and felt the weight of it all crash down. That moment in the kitchen when my wife spoke those words out loud, that was the moment everything changed for good between us all. But that was not the end of it like I thought. It was just the beginning.
After that Sunday, something in our house felt different every day. The air felt heavier, like it was harder to breathe in there. My wife stopped pretending things were fine between them both. She did not smile when my mother called me on the phone. She did not ask how she was doing or send her any messages. She just focused on the baby and let everything else fade away. My mother stopped coming over as much as she used to before. She called first, always asking if it was a good time to visit, and when I said yes, she stayed for an hour at most. She held the baby, she talked to me, then she left quietly. She did not try to talk to my wife anymore at all. She just said hello and goodbye without much in between those words. I could see the hurt in her eyes every time she left, and I could see the relief in my wife's face when she did. I was stuck between them, carrying a weight I could not share. I started feeling tired in a way sleep could not fix anymore. My body ached from the tension I held inside my chest daily. I would wake up at night with my jaw clenched tight shut. My shoulders hurt, my back hurt. Everything felt heavy all the time. I was trying to be the son my mother needed me to be. I was trying to be the husband my wife needed me to be. But I was failing at both without knowing how to stop it. My wife started saying small things that cut deeper than she knew. She would ask why I talked to my mother every single day. She would say the baby did not need so many visitors right now. She would go quiet when I mentioned my mother's name out loud, and I knew what she meant without her having to say it clearly. She wanted less of my mother in our life together as a family. But my mother was my family too. She had been there my whole life. How could I choose between the woman who raised me alone back then and the woman I chose to build my life with right now? Every choice I made felt like I was hurting someone I loved. If I called my mother, my wife would give me that look.
If I did not call her, my mother's voice sounded sad and distant. If I invited her over, my wife went upstairs with the baby. If I did not invite her, my mother asked if she did something wrong. I could not win. I could not fix it. I could not make it right. One night I sat in the nursery holding my son while he slept. I looked at his face, so calm and peaceful in my arms, and I wondered what kind of man I was becoming for him. A man who could not protect the people he loved from each other. A man who stayed silent when he should have spoken up before. A man who let the space between them grow wider every day. I wanted to be strong for him, but I felt so weak inside. I wanted to fix everything, but I did not know where to start. The silence in our house had become a living thing by then. It moved through the rooms. It sat at the table with us. It lay between my wife and me at night when we slept. It followed me when I talked to my mother on the phone alone, and I started to realize that silence was not keeping the peace. It was slowly killing something between all of us instead each day. My wife and I barely talked about anything real anymore at all. We talked about the baby, about what we needed from the store, but we did not talk about her. We did not talk about us. We just moved around each other like strangers sharing the same space, and I was still not ready to see what was right in front of me.
It was my son's first birthday when everything finally broke open. We planned a small party at our house with just close family. My wife spent days preparing everything to make it perfect for him. She baked the cake, she decorated the living room with bright colors. She wanted this day to be special for our son and for us. My mother called the week before asking what time to come over. I told her to arrive at 2 in the afternoon like everyone else, but I could hear something in her voice that sounded uncertain. Then she asked if my wife was okay with her being there that day. I told her of course she was, but I was not sure anymore. The morning of the party, my wife was moving fast around the house. She was setting up tables, arranging plates, checking everything twice over. I asked her if she needed help with anything at all. She said no and kept moving without looking at me once. I could feel the tension building inside her like a storm coming. The guests started arriving right at 2 in the afternoon as planned. My mother was the last one to walk through the door that day. She brought a big gift wrapped in blue paper for our son. She hugged me at the door and asked where my wife was. I pointed to the kitchen where she was cutting the cake alone. My mother walked over and said hello to her from across the room. My wife looked up and smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. She said hello back and went right back to what she was doing. My mother stood there for a moment like she wanted to say more, but then she just walked away and sat down with the other guests. I felt my chest tighten watching them avoid each other like that. The party went on, people laughed, my son played with his new toys, but I could not stop watching my wife and my mother in the room. They stayed on opposite sides of the house the entire time there. They did not talk, they did not look at each other at all. It was like they were strangers who happened to be in the same place. When it was time to cut the cake, everyone gathered around the table. My wife held our son in her arms while I lit the candle. We sang happy birthday and he clapped his little hands with joy. My mother stood at the back of the group watching from far away. She was smiling, but her eyes looked wet like she was holding back tears. After we cut the cake, my wife handed our son to me quickly. She said she needed to clean up the kitchen right away that moment, but I knew she just needed to get away from everyone there. I followed her into the kitchen and found her standing at the sink. Her hands were gripping the edge, her head was down, facing the floor. I asked her what was wrong, and she finally looked up at me. She said she could not do this anymore. Not today, not ever again. I asked her what she meant, but I already knew the answer deep down. She said having my mother here made her feel invisible in her own home. She said every time she came over, it felt like she was being replaced. She said she was tired of fighting for space in her son's life. Her voice broke when she said it and tears fell down her face. I stood there not knowing what to say to make it better for her, because part of me understood what she was feeling in that moment. But part of me also felt like she was asking me to choose between her and the woman who raised me all alone. And I did not know how to make that choice without losing someone. My mother walked into the kitchen right then, holding our son carefully. She said he was looking for his mother and needed her right now. My wife wiped her tears fast and took him from her without speaking. My mother looked at me, then at her, then back at me again. And I saw it in her eyes. She knew what was happening here. She knew she was the reason my wife was crying in the kitchen. She did not say anything. She just nodded and walked back outside alone. That was the moment I understood there was no going back from this. That was when I knew life divides itself into before and after clearly. After the party ended, everyone went home except my mother that day. She stayed to help clean up like she always used to do. But this time it felt different, heavy, like something was ending there. My wife took our son upstairs to put him down for the night. She did not say goodbye to my mother before she left the room. My mother and I stood in the kitchen, washing dishes in complete silence. I could feel her waiting for me to say something about what happened, but I did not know what to say that would make it better. She finally broke the silence and asked if my wife was okay now. I said yes, but we both knew I was lying to her face. My mother put down the dish she was holding and looked at me. She said she thought maybe she should not come around so much anymore. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the pain beneath those words. I wanted to tell her no, that she was always welcome here, but the words caught in my throat because they were not true. She was not welcome here, not in the way she used to be. And I think that was the moment I finally understood it all clearly. This was not about my mother doing something wrong to hurt us. This was not about my wife being cruel or cold to her. This was about two women loving the same child in different ways, and both of them feeling like there was not enough room for both. My mother was afraid of losing her place in my life forever. My wife was afraid of never being enough as a mother to our son. And I was caught between them, trying to make everyone feel safe. But the truth is, I could not make them both feel safe at once, because their fears were about each other, not about me at all. My mother feared being replaced by the new family I was building. My wife feared being overshadowed by the woman who raised me before. And no matter what I did or said, that fear would stay. I looked at my mother standing in my kitchen that night. I saw the woman who held me when I was scared as a child, the woman who worked 2 jobs to give me a good life, the woman who never asked for anything but my love in return. And I felt something break inside me that I could not repair, because I also saw my wife upstairs holding our son close to her, the woman who chose to build a life with me every single day, the woman who gave me a son and showed me what love could be, the woman who needed me to choose her above everyone else now. I realized in that moment that I had been trying to avoid this. I had been trying to keep everyone happy without facing the truth here. The truth was that my life had changed when my son was born. My mother was no longer the center of my world like before. My wife and my son were my family now, in a different way. And my mother would always be my mother, but things had shifted deeply. She needed to step back, and I needed to let her do it. Not because I loved her less, but because my family needed me more. I understood that now, standing in the kitchen with her that night. But understanding it and accepting it were 2 very different things then. My mother hugged me at the door before she left our house. She held me tight like she used to when I was small, and I felt like I was saying goodbye to something I could not name. She told me she loved me and that she would always be here. But I heard what she did not say out loud to me. She would always be here, but she would not be here the same way. She drove away, and I stood at the door watching her go. I felt the weight of what I finally understood settle on my chest. I went upstairs and found my wife sitting in the dark nursery alone. She was holding our son while he slept in her arms peacefully. I sat down beside her without saying a word at first. She looked at me with tired eyes that had cried too much today. And I knew she was waiting for me to say something that mattered. But I still was not ready to say it out loud yet, even though I knew the truth now.
The weeks after the birthday party felt like walking on broken glass. My mother stopped calling me every day like she used to before. She would text instead, asking how we were doing that week. I would answer, but my replies were short and felt empty inside. She did not ask to come over anymore at all. She just said to let her know if we needed anything from her. And I knew what that meant without her saying it out loud. She was waiting for me to choose between them both, finally. But how do you choose between the woman who gave you life and the woman you chose to build your life with right now? Every time I thought about calling my mother to visit us, I saw my wife's face the way it looked in the kitchen that day. Every time I held my son and thought about my mother at home, I felt the weight of her absence in his life growing heavier. My wife did not bring up my mother anymore after the party ended. She just went about her days taking care of our son alone. But I could see the relief in her eyes when days passed, days when my mother did not call or text or ask to come. And that relief made me feel something dark inside my chest, because it meant my wife was happier without my mother around us. It meant my family felt more complete when she was not there. And that truth hurt more than anything I had felt before now. I started to understand that any move I made would hurt someone. If I called my mother and invited her over to see us, my wife would go quiet and pull away from me for days. If I did not call my mother and let the distance grow, she would feel abandoned by the son she raised all alone. There was no right choice here. There was only loss on both sides. I was losing my mother slowly by keeping my wife happy and close. Or I was losing my wife slowly by keeping my mother in our lives. And either way, I was losing parts of myself in the process daily. One night I sat in the living room after everyone was asleep. I thought about the man I wanted to be for my son, a man who could protect his family from anything that hurt them, a man who could make hard choices when they needed to be made. But I was not that man yet. I was still afraid to choose. I was still holding on to the hope that things would fix themselves, that my wife and my mother would find a way back to each other. But deep down, I knew that was never going to happen now. The damage was done. The distance was too wide to cross anymore. My wife needed me to put her first, above everyone else, always. My mother needed me to remember where I came from before this life. And I needed both of them in ways I could not explain out loud. But I was starting to realize that needing both was not enough here. I had to choose who needed me more in this moment right now. I had to choose where my loyalty belonged as a husband and father. And even though I knew the answer in my mind already then, my heart was still fighting against it every single day that passed. I thought about my son growing up between these two women forever. I thought about him feeling the tension that I carried inside me. I thought about him learning to stay silent like I had done. And I knew I could not let that happen to him at all. He deserved better than a father who was too afraid to choose. He deserved a home where love did not feel like a war. And then came the day that changed everything for good.
I made the choice on a quiet Tuesday morning in late fall. My son was 2 years old, running around the house with joy. My mother had not been over in almost 3 months by then. We talked on the phone once a week, but it was not the same. I could hear the distance in her voice every time we spoke. She asked about my son, but she did not ask to see him. She knew the answer before I could even say it out loud. That morning, I sat down with my wife at the kitchen table. I told her I understood what she needed from me as her husband. I told her I would put our family first above everything else now. She did not smile, she just nodded like she already knew it coming. She reached across the table and held my hand in hers tightly, and I felt something settle inside me, but it was not peace. It was acceptance of a loss I could never get back again. I called my mother that afternoon while my wife was out shopping. I told her I thought we needed some space for a while, that my wife needed me to focus on our family right now. My mother was quiet for a long time on the other end. Then she said she understood and that she loved me no matter what. Her voice broke at the end and I felt my chest crack open. I told her I loved her too, and then we hung up. I sat on the couch staring at the phone in my hand, and I cried for the first time in years right there alone. I cried for my mother, who raised me by herself all those years. I cried for my wife, who needed me to choose her every day. I cried for my son, who would grow up with pieces missing. And I cried for myself, for the son I could not be anymore. The months that followed were quieter in our house than before. My wife seemed lighter, like a weight had been lifted off her. She smiled more. She laughed with our son. She helped me closer at night. And I tried to be present. I tried to be the husband she needed. But there were moments when I felt the absence like a hole. When my son did something new and I wanted to call my mother. When holidays came and her chair at the table stayed empty always. When I saw other families together and felt something twist inside me. I learned to live with that feeling, but it never went away. My mother and I still talk, but it is different now, forever. We are polite, we are careful, we do not go too deep. She asks about my son, and I send her photos on her phone, but she does not ask to visit, and I do not offer any more. We both know what we lost, but we do not talk about it, because talking about it would make it real in a way we cannot face. My son is 5 now, and he barely remembers her at all. He knows he has a grandmother, but she is just a voice on the phone. And that breaks my heart in ways I cannot explain to anyone here. I chose my wife, I chose my family, I chose the life I built, but the cost of that choice follows me every single day still. I learned that love is not always enough to keep people together. I learned that sometimes you have to let go to move forward. I learned that being a good husband meant not being the son I was. And I learned that some scars do not heal, they just become part of you. This is what is left after everything that happened between us all. Not happiness, not sadness, just the weight of what I carry now. I do not regret my choice, but I grieve what I lost because of it. And I think that is what it means to grow up finally. To understand that every choice takes something away from you forever, and to live with that loss without letting it destroy you completely.